This is the Type 1 Tribe podcast, and I am your host, Samantha Hildebrandt. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes on February 18th, 2021, and now I am sharing all of my experiences and knowledge with you. So let's go. Hey everyone, Samantha Hildebrandt here with Type 1 Tribe. Welcome back to my channel. I'm a type 1 diabetic as of February 18th, 2021. But today I actually want to talk about being celiac and celiac awareness because May is Celiac Awareness Month. And many type 1 diabetics actually also live with celiac disease or have some gluten sensitivity to some degree. And I want to tell my story of being diagnosed with a gluten sensitivity. So I actually do not have celiac, but I have a pretty intense inflammatory gluten sensitivity. And so sometimes I say I'm celiac, even though I technically am not. Like, for example, when I'm at a restaurant, sometimes I'll just say I'm celiac to ensure that I'm getting gluten-free. But I think it's important to really, talk about being celiac and talk about being gluten-free because it really does affect a lot of us people living with type 1 diabetes, and it's Celiac Awareness Month. So let's dive into my story of being diagnosed with a gluten sensitivity. Let's backtrack a little bit. So February 18th of 2021, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Fast forward to May of 2022. So it was about a year later. It's a year and a couple months later that I started having celiac symptoms. Obviously, at the time, I did not know this was like a gluten sensitivity, but I just started getting a lot of issues with my body. And it was May of 2022 that I remember first really getting a ton of symptoms. My very first symptom was actually my head itched, like incredibly bad. Like it was absolutely insane how bad my head itched. And I remember my husband and we were just like out doing something. And I remember I was literally like this the entire time. I was just scratching my head over and over again. And he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't know why, but my head itches so bad." And he was like, "Okay, that's really weird, but like, hope, whatever." And we both like blew it off. But then more and more symptoms started to happen. So then I remember we actually went camping a couple weekends after that. And I started getting these like rashes and also a swollen face and tongue. My tongue was swollen, my cheeks were swollen. And then I started getting these like rashes all over my body out of nowhere. And I remember I would wake up. We were camping and I woke up and I just felt like inflamed kind of. And I was like, what is going on? Like everything is just off. And I remember I took a picture of my face, which I'll include here, and my lips were swollen, my cheeks were swollen, everything was swollen. I was like, this is weird. But once again, we were camping. So I was like, did I get bit by a tick or something? Or, do I have Lyme disease? Or I don't know. Like all these things were running through my head. And then at that same camping trip, we were in Aspen. And so we went to a cute little brewery in Aspen, and I had a beer. And I started breaking out in this like red rash on my shoulder, which I'll also include a picture here. I thought it was so weird. I'm like, what is happening? I just, my face is blowing up. But of course, naturally, I didn't think it was the beer. I just thought it was something random happening to me, like a heat rash maybe or something. I had no idea. So I was hoping, obviously, that this would just be a one-time thing, maybe because we were in the mountains, we were in trees, we were with bugs, like maybe it was going to go away. Well, little do I know, it got a lot worse, and it got a lot worse pretty quickly, actually. The other important thing here, though, to mention is the Colorado Avalanche were also in the playoffs literally at this exact moment. And this was the year that they won the NHL Stanley Cup. And we're big hockey fans, and I live in Denver. So like we were like going out constantly to watch the games. We were drinking a lot at this time because we were just like, having fun watching hockey. And I had a lot of beer, a lot of low carb Coors Lights. And obviously I wasn't gluten-free at that time either. So I was eating bread and things that had wheat in it, wheat and barley and all of that. I feel like that obviously like really made my celiac on quotes. Sorry, I know I'm not celiac, but I might use that word interchangeably here. Gluten sensitivity, it really heightened it because I was drinking a lot of beer during this time to celebrate the Avalanche. But anyway, Also in May of 2022, we went to Vancouver. My husband had an Ironman race he was racing, and we were up in Canada and we went and extended our trip to Vancouver to just see it because I really wanted to see Vancouver. And by the way, if you've never been to Vancouver, it's freaking awesome. So you should go. Anyway, and so when we were there, I also remember I just like feeling like crap. Like I was like, something is going on. I don't know what is happening to me, but like I started getting rashes everywhere. Once again, my face was swelling up. And I'm like, this is really, really odd. And so obviously, as you can see, like this kept happening to me. It was not a one-time thing. And unfortunately, it did happen to me until about August. So every single day I had these symptoms. I would wake up, I would have rashes all over my body, which did actually come out a lot more in the heat, but they were always there. They just like really accelerated in the heat. I would always wake up with a swollen face. My tongue was tingly. I would get body pain. And I always use the example of, do you guys know those like rainmaker little things that like you can turn and like it will, the little things inside will go to the bottom and it will go like, shh, shh. I don't know. I'll attach a picture so you guys know what I'm talking about. But that is what my body felt like. I felt like when I would move an arm, I would get this like rush of pain. And it was really, really weird. It's hard to explain because it wasn't like joint pain. It was literally like inside my body, like creepy crawlies, but it would like rush down every time I would move a limb. It was terrible. That was probably the worst part, honestly, is the pain that I had in my body. And this lasted till August. So May, June, July, and August, I had this pain and I did not know what was going on. I never thought I would get like a gluten sensitivity, okay? Because I would, I just ate a lot of gluten and I was always fine before that. So what the heck? And I still to this day don't really know what triggered it per se, but that's, the life of autoimmune. It just shows up whenever it wants. And so, over that from May to August, I really, really tried to figure out what was going on with me. And I figured it was related to food, but it's hard because you're like, what do I even cut out? Like, there's so many different things that I could cut out. Like, where do I even start? And so I did cut out like tree nuts, nothing really made a difference. I did cut out dairy for a little bit, nothing really made a difference. And so I was like, okay, like I really don't want to cut out wheat, but whatever, let's try. And at the same time, I also was getting blood work done. I had like the IgG, IgA autoimmune tests, and it did come back elevated for celiac gluten sensitivity. And so my allergist, who's the one who actually ran that for me, because she was like, you have no allergies. It's got to be autoimmune. And so she ran the autoimmune test for me and she was like, okay, I would recommend going and seeing a gastroenterologist or whatever their titles are right now because it looks like you might have celiac. And I'm like, oh no, because you guys, I really love my beer. Okay. So that was really hard for me to hear that like I might have celiac and couldn't drink beer anymore. And so I ended up going to a gastroenterologist, and she also ran some more tests, did confirm that I was a little elevated for having gluten sensitivity, but it wasn't as elevated as someone that would have celiac would have. Like it was just like a tiny bit out of range, where somebody with celiac would probably be like a lot higher. And so she was like, you know what, let's just do an endoscopy and like check to see if you do indeed have celiac disease. So I went and did one of those tests. I went under, and did an endoscopy, which takes literally like 15 minutes. It was not long. Um, but it came back actually that I was completely fine. I had nothing wrong with my small intestine, nothing wrong with anything else. And so really the conclusion was that I just have a pretty severe gluten sensitivity that's inflammatory. So the other thing I didn't mention about this is I actually had no gastro issues, like zero at all. It was all inflammatory, which was another reason why I was like, I don't know if I have celiac because I hear a lot of people have gastro issues, like bowel related things. And I did not. I did not at all. It was all inflammatory. But apparently that's a thing. A lot of people can get gluten sensitivities that is inflammatory, which actually does kind of also align with just autoimmune. And so that was, my diagnosis in August of 2022. And in August of 2022 is when I completely gave up gluten. So that is a really quick overview of my gluten-free diagnosis story. I could go into, a lot more detail, but I do have a celiac video that I recorded back in 2022 that you should go watch if you're interested. But I did just want to share my story and, say that a lot of us do live with gluten sensitivities. I feel like I hear more and more people getting diagnosed with gluten sensitivities. But thankfully, in this day and age, there are many, many brands out there that are certified gluten-free or just gluten-free in general. And restaurants are so good with it, especially here in Denver, Colorado. Pretty much every single restaurant provides a gluten-free option. So I never have to worry about like finding something at a restaurant. Sometimes when I go back to the Midwest in Ohio, it can be a little bit more challenging just because they're not really up to date, I feel like, with the allergen situation. But Denver's awesome. And I know a lot of other states are awesome. So if you're somebody that lives with celiac or gluten sensitivity, I feel like just in this day and age, it's not as hard to be gluten-free. I know if you're celiac, it is a little bit more challenging to find places that, will clean the grill and make sure it's a safe space for celiacs when they're cooking. I know that can be a lot more difficult for people. And so I just want to say, like, I see you. If you're celiac, I understand. One of my best friends here in Denver is celiac. And so I see it firsthand of the things that she has to go through being celiac versus just me who's gluten sensitive. She has to do a lot more than I have to. I can eat cross-contaminated food and she cannot. And so, being celiac is a huge autoimmune condition. And I'm happy because I think it is getting a lot more awareness than it used to back in the day. And so I wanted to do my part and share my story of gluten sensitivity, but then also just say like, hey, like, it is Celiac Awareness Month. First off, if you're not celiac, you should be appreciating every single day that you are able to eat wheat because I miss it sometimes. But also tell somebody that has celiac, like, I see you. I know all the struggles you go through along with type 1 diabetes, especially if we're somebody that has both. It's like just constantly worrying about all of our autoimmune conditions. And so I just want to say I see you and thank you for, listening to my story. And I'll see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye. Okay, so one brand you're going to have to check out if you are celiac or gluten sensitive is the Good Crisp Company. They are certified gluten-free and super, super celiac friendly. The competitor, the big one that you guys all may know of, is not gluten-free. Shocker, it's not gluten-free. So if you want a crisp chip that's gluten-free, check out the Good Crisp Company.